All right, this is Tom Tresser doing an introduction and TIF briefing for Monica Eng. This recording will be put on YouTube, and anyone can look at it. So let's talk about TIFs. Here we go. We'll share the screen. There we go. So this kind of presentation has been done now over 185 times in communities all across Chicago metro area, and we're even working with activists in 15 other cities. The Civic Lab is a black-led 501c3 do tank, been around since 2013. We're about expanding civic imagination, if I had to put it into a small nutshell, about what's possible for Chicago's future. Our kind of mantra is investigate, fabricate, educate, activate, liberate, and repeat. We're known for this book, Chicago's Not Broke, Funding the City We Deserve, which is part of the TIF story, or I should say the TIF story is part of this. This book contains $5 billion, with a B, in sustainable revenue solutions for the city on an annual basis. And again, TIFs fit into that puzzle. As I say, we've done public meetings or TIF illuminations all over the place since 2013. Here's just a few images. You see people come out for this stuff, and we have no marketing. So this is we're not putting advertisements, no billboards. It's all direct word of mouth, flyering, emailing, Facebook, etc. We have a great website, tifreports.com. There's a lot of information on there. And the presentations that we do, we tend to put them online, and over 280,000 people have looked at those presentations, again, with no marketing. Groups call us, as I mentioned. Here's one where you can see my colleague, Jonathan Peck, doing a presentation for South Side Together for Power, STOP. But we're also all over the place. So here's just a few places that we're working. And you can see the Detroit People's Platform grabbed this work, and we trained them for about a year to do their own illumination, their own data mining and investigatory reporting to reveal in Detroit what's been hidden there, just like this information has been hidden in Chicago. So this is a map created by the activists and organizers inside the Detroit People's Platform. And you can start to see it's a map with, other kinds of storytelling. They're trying to get to the bottom of just how many TIFs are there and how much money have they stolen and who got it. They published a really great newspaper. It's like 20,000 copies of this Detroit People's Platform News, which contained this kind of really great explainers, or memes or visualizations of policy. So this is how we roll, and this is how our good allies in Detroit translated the information for their people. And this is one of my favorites that they cooked up. Again, designed to be given away and read in the laundromat, in the bodega, in the restaurant, and then taken home and shared. We were brought to Cincinnati by the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers a few years ago, because in Cincinnati, which had about 40 TIFs, was going to add another 15. So the pink on this map, all the little pink spaces, were new TIFs that their mayor were going to introduce in one day. And we were brought there and helped them organize. They created a petition, a website. The president of the Federation got this op-ed in their local newspaper. All this happened within 72 hours once the Civic Lab got involved. And we actually caused a ruckus in Cincinnati. And after 2 years of work with no results, the city actually released the amount of money stuck in TIF accounts in Cincinnati, which had been unknown until that point, which is $40 million. And that was about an eighth of their budget. So that's just one tiny little incident. But you can see all over the country, this TIF stuff is part of something bigger. And we can talk about that. The MIT has a challenge, a technology challenge called anti-racist technology in the U.S. They entertained solutions from around the country. Over 1,800 people submitted their solutions. We were a finalist in 2021. Oh, we could have gotten almost $1 million, but unfortunately, we did not cross the finish line. But at least I would say MIT agrees with the Civic Lab that TIFs are racist. So this is how we do it, Monica. We grab PDFs. So the city, for all its bragging about transparency, right, and putting shit out there, doesn't really want people to know this. So what we do is we grab these annual reports. Each TIF district has one. The report's about 40 pages long. And myself and my volunteers, we go through them one by one, placing them into a shared spreadsheet, really, really simple stuff, and then create a spreadsheet, like a real spreadsheet. So you can see how big this is, to report out. And then so what we are able to distill is what we're going to report now. So here we have 2021, Chicago had 132 TIF districts, and in the suburbs of Cook County, another 325. So you can see how they touch over there on the Chicago map. That's because TIF money can move between adjacent TIF districts in a practice called porting. And just over time, again, you can see how we like, maps and visualizations. You can see back 2006, in the early Daley years, we had the TIFs in purple, but fast forward to today, and you can see about 34% of the entire city is in a TIF district of one or another. So we like humor at the Civic Lab. I'm a fan of monster movies. And so the trope there, the scientist cobbles together the monster and says, don't worry about it. I got it under control. You know what I mean? But then the next thing you know, the monster bursts his chains, breaks the scientist's neck, and sets the village on fire. So that's what we think is going on here with those 132 TIFs here in Chicago. In 2021, they removed $1.1 billion. So that's your first headline. $1.1 billion disappearing into the TIF districts. They spent about $308 million. So money comes in to these districts and money is spent by these districts. And since they came to Chicago way back in 1986, we believe that TIFs have stolen or removed over $10 billion in property taxes, because that's what we're talking about now, property taxes. TIFs really came under Mayor Daley. He really is the guy that perfected this machine, use of the TIFs. So you can see during his term, the number of TIFs and the amount of money that the TIFs have taken just went through the roof, almost like a 45-degree angle, straight up. And since Daley, the two mayors since him, the number of TIFs have gone down, but the amount of money that they're taking on a yearly basis just gets bigger and bigger every single year. Now, this is the single biggest number that we reveal to the general public every year through this research, and that is how much money is sitting in all the TIF accounts at the end of the current reporting year. Again, this is what we do from all that aggregation of looking at the reports. So at the end of 2021, Chicago's TIF districts contain $2.3 billion. That to me is also an underreported or possibly unknown number that we put out there every year. And you'll see, I think, in the civic architecture or civic ecosystem, people picking up on that and sort of demanding, where's our money? The teachers union does it, the grassroots collaborative does it, housing organizers do it, but they don't credit the Civic Lab necessarily, but they're using our research. Now this guy, Anthony Moser, is one of the many, many organizers and activists that I've recruited, hundreds of them over the years. And what Anthony has done is put a sort of a visualization tool together. So you can check him out by going to his website and sort of playing around with this visualization. It's pretty cool. So let me put that into the chat because I think it would be useful, if you want to sort of play around with that. Here we go. Let's just stop sharing for a minute, and then I can put that link into the chat. Yeah, here it is. So, yeah, here we go. So that's where Anthony's work is at. So he created that map visualization tool because that's a lot to grab your head around. And I think I sent you the 2021 report, which is a lot of text. But anyway, Anthony has the skills to help visualize and help people grasp the context of these things. Now, we got some money from the Muckrock Foundation last year to hire a couple organizers to comb through all the TIF reports in the state of Illinois. So this has never been done before, to my knowledge. And I was the project leader and trained the young people in how to do this work. And we created this master spreadsheet that's like, huge. And the organizers were these individuals: Leslie Cortez, who is an Obama Fellow. She's also a youth organizer for El Vejo, Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, and Stephanie Figueroa, who was a youth organizer with El Vejo. So Leslie and Stephanie were a team. And Sebastian Niles, who's a young organizer, an activist from Evanston, ran for mayor, I think it was about a year ago, when he was about 20. Sebastian is on the board of the YMCA of Evanston and also on the board of the Democratic Party of Evanston. So you have these three younger activists and organizers, and we turned them loose on the TIF reports of Illinois. And this is news. You are the first to hear this, actually. So in Illinois, we detected 1,448 TIFs across 545 municipalities inside 96 counties. 84 reports, about 6%, were missing. So 35 municipalities are actually in violation of the statute and there's no paperwork on their TIFs. So they're dispensing public money in the dark. And that's another news story. And we can have a conversation about how to get these missing reports from these recalcitrant municipalities. One of them, by the way, is Cicero, where there's nothing to be seen for the last few years, and they have one of the worst TIFs in the state. So you could probably do a whole series of articles on what's going on in Cicero. The total amount of property tax removed by all these TIFs across the state of Illinois is $1.5 billion. The cumulative amount of money from those current TIFs is almost $15 billion. That is to say, since all these current TIFs came into operation when they were first started till today, 15 billion. But that doesn't include the amount of money these TIFs stole from TIFs that are no longer working. So there are a lot of TIFs, that lived their lives and were sunset. And we don't have that number from all the state, but we do have it for Chicago. So the TIFs that are no longer active in the city of Chicago stole another 17 billion. So then you would say, we're starting to get a lot. We're starting to talk about over $31 billion that we know of, all in from all TIFs in the state of Illinois, and that's underreporting for sure by billions. The total amount of money that these TIFs across Illinois spent in 2020 was 1.2 billion. And then how much money was left in the TIF accounts from the whole state? $2.3 billion. Again, with about half of these numbers coming from Chicago. And that makes sense. Chicago is a very wealthy city. We have these powerful TIFs in very wealthy parts of the city. So it makes sense that even though we only have less than 10% of the TIFs of the state, we have like 50% of the hit of the amount of money. And this, as you can see, the TIF extraction across the whole state going from 1980 to the present time. And it's a staggering $23 billion that we know of. Again, only from existing TIFs. So this total doesn't include TIFs that are expired. So it's actually probably a much bigger picture if we can ever fill it out. But then you would wonder, well, if that's just one state, what's going on in the rest of the country? I wish I could tell you. We estimate that there's 40,000 TIF districts across thousands of cities extracting $40 billion each and every year. Remember, this is all property taxes. And why do we care? Well, when $1 of property tax goes missing, our public schools are the biggest loser because public schools are supposed to get between 50 and 60 cents of every property tax dollar collected. So these are what we call possible story hooks or organizing hooks. Where are the 84 TIFs missing reports? Why are they missing? Are there any penalties for non-compliance? Do we need to lawyer up and go after Cicero to make them, tell us what's been going on with their TIFs? And do we need new laws in this regard? So here's just another example. Here's East St. Louis. Most of the little town of East St. Louis is in a TIF district, and they are not reporting. So we don't know what's going on there. And as I mentioned, the 7 TIFs of Cicero, we're in the dark there. But Cicero's TIF number 1 has actually removed a staggering $262 million from 2020. And you have to wonder, how is that even possible with a small town like Cicero? It actually beggars the imagination that this TIF, which has been around for a while, has actually removed that much money from such a small area. And what do they do with that money? And we know that several people, over the years, Cicero has sent many people to prison for corruption. So my guess is they do not want us to know the answer to these questions. So why do other relatively small spaces have a ton of TIFs? And we would, if I had a staff, I'd actually send a reporter to the city of Marion and to Rockford, because you can see in Marion, which again is relatively small, has 15 TIFs, and the city of Rockford has 32. What's up with all that? So with our friends at Muck Rock, we're going to be in a little while sending out a press release to all this, to places across Illinois. But eventually, we'd like to partner up and do this kind of work for every city, every state. Just rinse and repeat. The organizing opportunities that we present to our colleagues and allies are the following. If you care about property taxes and good governance, you should be very worried about all this, because property taxes starve local government by TIFs, by removing property taxes from general circulation. So this is the pie chart for the use of property taxes in Cook County, from the county clerk. And what they're telling us is that TIFs in 2021 took 16% of all the property taxes collected in the city of Chicago. So And you can see there in the blue, the CPS got about 44%, but they're supposed to get 56. So what does that tell us? The TIFs take money off the top. So if you're a property owner living in a TIF district and you pay $1,000 in property tax, and you think that about 600 of that dollars is supposed to go to the Board of Ed, you're wrong, because that TIF eats first. The TIF takes it off the top, and then what's left is divided amongst the units of government that are supposed to get money from property taxes. So this is why we are calling this out as a racist practice. So the Cook County's Assessor Office just 2 weeks ago did a presentation that sort of even added more fuel to the fire. They asked the question of, what if TIFs did not exist? So this is saying this is a decrease in your property taxes. So you can see that there's a decrease, or put another way, having TIFs across Cook County is an upward pressure on everyone's property tax. So what they're saying is, if you remove TIFs from Cook County, it would be a 15% decrease. To me, that's another headline. And put it another way, the way the presenter from the assessor's office, he actually picked a property in Pilsen and actually ran the numbers. So that this particular property paid about $10,700 in property taxes in 2021. And then what he did is he magically removed the TIFs from the system and then said, okay, how much does this property pay now? And it dropped to $9,000, a decrease of 15%. So this appeals to people on the left and the right. People who don't like crony capitalism, whether you're a conservative or progressive, as I count myself, this is odious. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've owned my townhouse in Lincoln Park since 1999, and if you're telling me that if I could somehow go back in time and get 15% back on all the property taxes that I sent, in over the last 20 years, I mean, I could retire. I could send my nephews to college. You know what I mean? That's a lot of money. The definition of blight is meaningless. This is another thing that the Civic Lab calls out. It's so elastic as to allow any property in the state of Illinois to be TIFed. So you have the Loop TIFed, you had the West Loop TIFed, and you have parts of Lincoln Park TIFed. So by putting a TIF in the Loop, we spent $842 million on office buildings down there. By putting a TIF in the West Loop, we allowed the developers of the Marianos to get $7 million. And by putting a TIF near me in Lincoln Park, we allowed the owners of the Grossinger's auto chain to get $9 million to renovate a warehouse, to make it their superstore and repair shop. Now they were since bought out by, it's called New City Toyota now. But here's what we think is the most pressing reason why TIFs are racist and should be worrisome to any person concerned with economic and racial justice. They foster economic inequity and segregation because they handcuff money in prosperous communities and starve poor communities. This heat maps from the Chicago Reporter is about 13 years old, but it shows you where's the TIF spending. There's more TIF spending where there's prosperity than there's poverty. And that makes sense, because if your community is poor and there's a TIF on it, it fills up very slowly because you don't have a lot of wealth there. You don't have a lot of high rises. But you put a TIF on the West Loop or the financial district or the business district, which has happened, and you've got high-rise buildings there turning off tens of millions of property tax dollars, all that is captured by the TIF and cannot be used in other parts of the city. That is what we call anti-distributional. Now, the Civic Lab has lots of records, lots of evidence. This is just one slide of many, many, many projects we have. We have literally a spreadsheet with at least 50 of these kinds of examples. But you can just see here's, $54 million in TIF money to renovate that office building at Randall Street into apartments. $5 million to turn the Carbon and Carbide building into the Hard Rock Hotel. And now that's changed owners at least 3 times. And then in the West Loop, $11 million of TIF money was used to build PepsiCo's Midwest headquarters. But the most egregious recent use of TIFs would be these 2 super TIFs created for Lincoln Yards, the developer there being Sterling Bay, and the related Midwest building Project 78. The Project 78 TIF down at Clark and Roosevelt is getting $1.1 billion in subsidies, and the Lincoln Yards TIF, $1.3 billion. So that's $2.4 billion for 2 projects that are happening in white, affluent neighborhoods. And inside that cost, buried, is $800 million in finance fees. So we're shipping $800 million of public money to Wall Street just for these 2 deals. But haven't we sent Wall Street enough of our public money? I wonder. Now, Lori Lightfoot wants to address the vacancy problem in the financial district around LaSalle Street by using TIF money to convert high-rise office buildings into high-end residential. So not only did we use TIF money to build some of those buildings, some of which were flipped, and the owner took that profit and the TIF money with him, but now Lori Lightfoot wants to actually use the same program to renovate some of those same buildings into high-end residential. And you can see the PR machine is already ginning this up. We've seen articles in Cranes already, at least 2 or 3 op-ed pieces under the heading of, save LaSalle Street. We can't let LaSalle Street go. And I think they're softening up the public and the city council to put this scam in front of them to get it passed. I think it's outrageous. Now, also that the Bears want to move to Aurora, and they are working on a TIF to finance their entertainment complex in Aurora. So the good people of Aurora are upset, as they should be, since the McCaskey family are billionaires from the revenue they received from the Bears over the years. There's no reason why the public should spend a dime on the Bears. But also, Mayor Lightfoot wants to put a dome on the stadium, if the Bears leave, and she wants to spend $2 billion of public money just for the dome. Craziness. And finally, we say these TIFs corrupt. They corrupt the budgeting process. They corrupt the planning process. We often find the alderman receiving campaign contribution from the people who received the TIFs. That is to say, the developers, the architects, the lawyers. Carrie Austin of the 34th Ward, who's indicted, is heading to prison, received almost $15,000 from the developers of 2 projects that received about $23 million in TIF funds. Walter Burnett, the 27th Ward, received $3,000 from that Mariano's developer. So the Mariano's developer got $7 million in funds, gave Walter $3,000. Danny Solis, who wore a wire for the FBI for 2 years, received $64,000 in campaign contributions from the principals of just 1 project, a food distribution center that got $9 million in TIF funds. And finally, Brian Hopkins, alderman of the 2nd Ward, which included up until now, until the remap, but when the Lincoln Yards project was first introduced, it was in his ward. Brian acted as the MC to marshal and push the project through all the various processes. He received $6,000 from one of the Lincoln Yards principals. But my favorite headline is this one from the Sun-Times. I need his favor for my TIF money. I, meaning the businessman that Alderman Burke was shaking down, needs his favor, Alderman Burke's, for my TIF money. This is very common. So that's kind of how we roll. I'll stop sharing, and I'll keep the recording going to capture any questions and any further interactions, if that's okay.
Actually, if we could just stop the recording now, because I wanted, when I talk to sources.
Absolutely. Okay, that concludes the recording. Everything else will be just for us, but the recording up to now, I will make public.